what I consider food, what I consider clothes, what I consider entertainment, maybe some of the language I use. Everything else is the same. And it's this idea that you don't love animals unless you're vegan. If that's true, you wouldn't be vegan. If you didn't love animals before you were vegan, why'd you go vegan?
Well, welcome to the Veganpreneur Revolution podcast show. Today, I am so excited. One, I get to be here with V-Lynn again. And two, I get to talk with Bobby Sud, who I actually had Bobby on my Plant-Based Eating for Health show probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and was fascinated with your story, Bobby. Really look forward to digging into that, your advocacy, your photography, and of course, your cat. We have to talk about your cat. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to V-Lynn, and she's going to start the ball rolling with some questions. And how are you, V-Lynn?
I'm great, Kathleen. Thank you. How are you? You sound fabulous.
I sound fabulous, but I'm kind of in the dark and we're trying to figure out my lights. But, you know, it is what it is.
It is, and it's okay. The important piece is that we're here with our guest, and I'm excited. I did some homework on you, and I was just blown away by all that you've done. And I want to know, where did it start? Were you a little kid running around saving animals, or did it even matter back then? How was your childhood?
Thank you for the very nice intro. I appreciate that. I mean, I've always been in animals. I've always cared about animals. Human beings, unless you're a psychopath, we care about animals. It's just, we're beings of empathy. It's just how we are. And I went to college. I majored in filmmaking, and then I specialized in environmental filmmaking, but I still wasn't a vegan yet. And then it wasn't until like my health got really out of control and I adopted a plant-based lifestyle. And after about 8 months, I had lost like 100 pounds and I reversed my diabetes and high cholesterol and hypertension and all that. And my brother and I were speaking at SoCal Veg Fest in Orange County outside of LA. And he introduced me to a friend of his named John Pierre. And John Pierre, you know who he is.
We do know, yeah, we know John. He's one of our favorite people. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a very special light in this world. He's a very special person. My brother told him that I was a filmmaker and a photographer, and he asked if I'd ever done anything with animals. And I said, that I hadn't, other than a short film I made in college. And he asked if I wanted to go to this pig vigil that his friend and partner were starting. I didn't know what a pig vigil was, so I asked him, and he sort of told me what it was, although the pig vigils were just starting out, so he couldn't give me a very detailed description. But he said Sean Monson will be there, Joaquin Phoenix will be there, Moby will be there, and I mean, I don't even try to hide this. That's why I went. I was a young person trying to be a filmmaker, and you tell me the person who made the most important animal rights film of all time is going to be there. Tell me Joaquin Phoenix is going to be there and Moby's going to be there. Yeah, I'm going to go. That was when it all started. The next day, standing on a sidewalk outside of a slaughterhouse, and other than being there, it was just a normal Sunday until that first truck came around the corner and brought the weight of its reality. And I remember, and I've told this story a lot of times. I hope it isn't getting old and people aren't going off this story again. But
well, you got to remember, you've got those of us who have not heard this story before, so don't leave anything out.
I remember going up to that first truck at the vigils. The Vernon police would stop each truck for 2 to 3 minutes for us, and I remember having this very visceral experience of, standing inches away from a truck filled with 200 6-month-old piglets that are going to die. I remember, you can see them, you can touch them, you can hear them, you can smell them. The air tastes weird. And for 2 minutes, looking at each individual pig, seeing different eye color, different expressions, seeing 200 individuals suffering in the same condition, each handling it in their own individual way. You know, seeing the individuality of them, and not just a truck full of pigs, but a truck full of individuals. And I remember when the 2 minutes were up and the truck pulled into the gates of the slaughterhouse, I had this sort of epiphany, or whatever you call it, where I realized that I don't know what happens after I die. You know, I don't know if there's heaven or afterlife or reincarnation or whatever, or if it's just over. But I know that myself and everyone else get to be on this planet as this individual that we are now once. This individual gets one chance to create as much connection and passion and purpose and love and meaning in my life until my one chance is over. And when I saw that truck pull into the slaughterhouse, I realized that for those pigs, that was their one chance. And like, everything changed for me after that. And I went and talked to Sean. I told him that I was trying to be a filmmaker. He asked me if I would film the vigil. He just wanted to see what kind of filmmaker I was. So I filmed it. I gave him my footage, and then he asked if I would help him shoot his next movie. And that's how it all started.
Wow.
Yeah.
What year was that?
2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I know that Shout Out LA actually helped to put you more in the spotlight.
Yeah, they did.
Calling you the filmmaker, photographer, and the LA Animal Save organizer. And was that the LA Save Animal Save organizer? Was that what came out of this experience?
Yeah. I went to every vigil. I started going to every vigil, which was, there were 2 pig vigils every week and 1 chicken vigil every week. And I started taking, I had no plans of being a professional photographer. Photography was always just something I did when I wasn't filmmaking, when I wasn't shooting something. And I started photographing the pigs and the chickens at every vigil, and people seemed to think that my work was good. And Animal Save Movement asked me if I wanted to be an organizer. And then when Amy Jean Davis, who's the founder of LA Animal Save, when she got pregnant, she asked me to take over for her until she was able to come back. So that's kind of how it happened.
Oh, okay.
So before we go any further, how do people get in touch with you and see your photography? Because your work is incredible. And then I want to talk about the emotions of how you deal with your emotions going to these vigils and taking these pictures, and they're having an impact, and yet it's got to hit your heart so deep and heavy. So how do people find you, Bobby?
You can find my work, all my work's on Instagram at Bobby Sud.
Okay.
I'm working on a book that I'll hopefully finish this year, because nobody's going to want to buy my prints and put them on the wall. So, which was an advice from a friend of mine it was very good advice, because during the lockdown, during the pandemic, and we weren't having vigils, obviously, because we would have 200 to 400 people at each vigil. He asked what I was doing. And I said, well, I was thinking of, making some prints of my photos and selling them. And he said, very honestly to me, he said, listen, Bobby, I love your photography, but there's no way I'm hanging it on my wall. And he's like, but if you did a book, people would probably be interested in a book. So I'm working on that.
So,
Fabulous.
as in a coffee table type book?
Yeah, a photography book. Yeah.
Now, most of your work is black and white, isn't it?
No, it's 50-50.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with the emotions that come up? How do you, what's your self-care process? Because I would imagine that could send you into a spiral of depression and thinking, is this ever going to change? And which I've asked myself that many, many times, and I've yet to go to a vigil, but just knowing what I know and looking at your beautiful artwork, what is your self-care?
Yeah. So when I started, I had to remind myself what is my motivation. The very first time I filmed with Sean, the very first day, this is my very first time doing any sort of animal rights filmmaking. We were on the kill floor of a cow slaughterhouse for a halal slaughter, and Sean's like, "Listen, this is going to be trial by fire, but you can't show any emotion. You got to have a poker face the entire time." And I remember I said, okay, what is my motivation? Is my motivation because I hate this? Is my motivation that I hate this and I hate people who hurt animals and I hate that animals are being killed and that there are slaughterhouses and factory farms, which is a reasonable motivation, right? I mean, for anybody who cares, when we all care about animals, but I also realized that if that was my motivation, then every action I took would be a reminder of how much I hate things. So I decided to make it be motivated by love, that I love animals and I love helping them and I love helping the planet. I love helping people have the same kind of health change that I did, helping people find their health and happiness again and change the way they view the world and move through the world. And if I did that, every action I took would be an affirmation of love instead of hate. And it worked for a while. You'd be on a kill floor, looking through the lens of an animal who's about to die and then photographing them or filming them dying and just telling yourself, I'm here because I have that much love for them. But you can't compartmentalize things because I do also hate what I'm seeing.
Right.
I don't hate anyone. I really don't. I don't hate any slaughterhouse worker or factory farmer, or I just hate how they make me feel. And which is a big difference, because if you make them your enemy, then they're just your adversary for life, because neither of you are interested in changing anyone, just defeating everyone. I want the slaughterhouse owner to be on my side one day, standing next to me at a vigil.
Wow.
Completely turning it around. I love that. And that's where your love-based animal activism came in.
Yeah.
And when you describe your pictures, it's one thing to see all of these amazing pictures, but I would imagine that you also have a caption or a description of the pictures. What do they say?
Actually, there's a line in the book Dominion by Matthew Scully that I read. I tried to find every animal rights book I could find when I went vegan. I was reading all of them. And there's a line that says that animal agriculture isn't just killing, it's negation. It's a complete denial of the animal as an individual being with his or her own wants or needs and desires. And when I read that, I said, oh, all right, that's what I'm going to show in my photography. Each individual and what they're going through. And that it's not a truck with 200 pigs. It's a truck with 200 individual pigs, or a truck with 8,000 individual chickens, each experiencing it in their own way. And that's where I want to show a lot of my photos look like portraits, because I want to show the individual. I don't want to show the crowd,
Nice. Very interesting. And I know that you've had multiple film projects since the beginning. Tell us which one you believe was your most impactful and why.
Probably the series I did with Generation Vegan, which was then called $1 Million Vegan. Because I think that because it was about health transformations, it reached more people. And we did about 80 videos of athletes and doctors and people who had changed their life and their health through a plant-based diet. And I think that probably reached more people that way.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about those groups. I understand you had soldiers were part of the people that you had in there. Tell us how each group kind of reacted to your doing this, and what was the common theme for them as far as their conversation around why they were in this situation and had this health transformation.
I think the common thing for most of them, which is, it's unfortunate, is that they were in a position where they had no choice. People ask me how I lost over 100 pounds. I had no choice. If I didn't, I was going to go blind because I was diabetic, or I was going to lose a limb or something, and I was going to die, probably 30 years before I should have. It's unfortunate that we need to be in those situations for most people to act. But I would say that for most of the interviews, that was the case. And even with, like, one of my favorite interviews was Paul de Gelder, who he's the host of Discovery Channel Shark Week now, but he was a Navy clearance diver in Australia, and he was attacked by a shark, and he lost his right hand and right leg.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, he was trying to still be in the military, but couldn't figure it out. But his good friend was Damien Mander, and he went to visit Damien Mander, who started the Akashinga Rangers in South Africa, which is an all-female Rangers team that protects rhinos and elephants and things like that. And I know James Cameron did a short documentary about him. And Paul wasn't vegan yet, and he was asking him, why don't you eat animals? And Damien Mander said, well, I love animals and I protect animals. If I ate them, I'd be a hypocrite, and I really hate hypocrites. Mm. That's kind of what got Paul to change. And now now Paul is one of the most, prolific at this time, at least, shark conservationists. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He's the host of Shark Week. He's always doing stuff, and it's really cool. So
nice.
Well, I want to take a step back, because you kind of brushed over the fact that you lost 100 pounds and or you released it. And this, we love to cover stories about people who have had that kind of transformation and then they became aware of their life's work as a result of that, moving into whatever it is that they do within the vegan movement. So when was it that you just said enough is enough? And, I think of Tim Kaufman, who was over 400 pounds. Sure, and it was the day that his wife was tying his shoe, and he looked at her head and he thought, she's going to bury me. And that was the turning point. That was what did it for him. Was it easy? No. I mean, he has a phenomenal story, as you do too. And so tell us more about when you hit that wall of saying enough is enough. I don't want to go blind. I don't want to lose my legs. I don't want to live like this anymore.
Yeah. I was still living in Austin at the time. My brother and I had just come back from Nepal. We were working with orphans there for 12 weeks. My brother had gone through recovery, found sobriety, and adopted a plant-based diet and transformed his life, 3 years before this. So I saw what was possible. But when you're, at least in my experience, and I imagine this experience is similar for others, but when your life is that bankrupt in terms of pleasure and purpose and connection, like all I was doing, because I was never heavy until then, and so I wasn't going out and hanging out with people. I wasn't doing anything meaningful. My life was, the only pleasure I really got was from fast food. And when that's your main source of pleasure, it's a scary thing to say, all right, I'll risk giving up the only source of pleasure in my life because you're promising me that it will get better, and that took my brother like 3 years of trying to get me to do that. Wow. And he eventually convinced me. I had done all these diets trying to cheat the system, which is what most diets are, right? And I agreed to move out to LA and adopt his lifestyle, and that's how it started.
Now, that's your twin brother, am I correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And is he still sober?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's because I've got 40 years of sobriety. So, and that kind of can be a trigger for making major changes in other areas of our lives. And what would you say when you were making the change into being a plant-based eater? Did you identify immediately as a vegan, or what did it come in degrees? What happened with that?
Yeah, at first all I was focused on was like, getting used to what my new life was going to be like. Mm-hmm. Like getting used to, at first I didn't like a lot of vegetables and I didn't know how to cook anything. And so I was but thankfully my brother and I are the same way. I can eat pretty much the same thing every day and be okay. Mm-hmm. Which is essentially what I did for like 6 months. But yeah, I was really into Jordans. Like I had a big sneaker collection and I was like, oh, I got to give these up. Because Jordans are leather.
Yeah.
It took me a while to adopt a fully vegan lifestyle. I was mostly plant-based until then. Yeah.
Well, so I was reading something that indicated that you suffered from depression and PTSD.
Mhm.
How did all of that play in?
That was, I mean, depression is something I've dealt with for a long time. Uh, Bipolar depression is what I was diagnosed with, forever ago. PTSD came from working with Sean, and full disclosure, I think it was what, a year or so ago, I spent 12 weeks in a mental health clinic
Mm-hmm.
for PTSD.
Hmm.
And that's because I thought I had it figured out, right? Like I thought I had a system, but like I said, you can't compartmentalize things. I
Yeah.
was just ignoring all these things that I hated. And when you have no guidance in dealing with hate, and when you have nowhere to put it, it turns inward. That's just what
Mhm.
hate is. When you have nowhere to put it and nothing positive or constructive to do with it, it turns inward and you start to hate yourself, which is what
Well,
happened.
I have to say, I really appreciate you for being that transparent about it, because there are so many people out in the world and vegans who are still in that space. And a lot of people don't share
Mm-hmm.
that piece. And the fact that, sometimes you have to go for outside help to
Mm-hmm.
get help with the inside. I think I remember telling Kathleen one time, I remember somebody telling me, well, you have all the answers within you. And I'm like, well, why am I still dealing with this if they aren't coming up? Obviously, there is outside help that's needed to help to bring about understanding and resolution and relief. And I just want to say thank you for being transparent and sharing that, because that was traumatic. Seeing those animals like that, I mean, that how could that not be?
Right. Right.
And I think about, that the film, The $1 Million Vegan, the campaign that you did, and the fact that those stories are still stories that need to be shared all over the place.
Mhm.
Well, I'm going to ask a selfish question. Are you planning on, or would you plan on doing a second series? Because
Well,
there are a lot of stories out there that would just help so many people.
yeah, $1 Million Vegan, which has changed their name to Generation Vegan. They had done 2 campaigns before that. One, I helped with one shoot, and that was with Genesis Butler. I don't know if you know who she is or not.
Yeah,
She's a famous
yeah.
activist. And so each time they try to do it on something different. The one that I worked on the most was the health one. And so they're doing one now focusing on the environment. And I'm sure that they'll do another animal one again. I don't know if I'll work with them again or not. We'll see.
Well, I'd like to throw it out there that it would be great to have one done focusing on plant-based and vegan entrepreneurs. Of
Yeah.
course, that is our space. That is a lot of people who are in this space doing the work that they do because of their own experiences and story, but even more than that, because of the people that they have transformed their lives into and are helping. So I'm just going to throw that out there. And then, with Kathleen and I, we're in the middle. She just turned 70. I'll be 70 next year. And, we're in this
Next
space
year,
of,
next month.
oh,
Next
I'm
month.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, next month. Did I say next year?
You're pushing it out in the future. It's next month.
Next month. We're in this space where we know that there could be and will be, especially with the contribution that we have been purposed to bring to the world, more 70-year-olds who are not just high functioning, but, in this space of educating and advocating and
Mm-hmm.
telling the stories that help others to wake up and begin their journeys or get fortified on their journeys to living healthier, more aware lives. And, as I say that, is there anything that you see out there now? Kathleen and I are always naming movies and books that we recommend. Is there any project that you've been a part of that you would recommend that we can recommend as we're telling our stories and some of the things that we want others to pay a particular eye and attention to?
Um, Well, the newest thing that came out was the documentary I did with Moby. I mean, he shot most of it. I shot the animal footage for it. It's called Punk Rock Vegan Movie, which is really just about the vegan messaging that came out of the straight edge punk rock scene in the 60s. That's the newest thing that I've done. But I don't like pushing my own work. And I've kind of changed my view on things. I don't know how much the Dominion and Earthlings model works anymore.
Right.
Like when I was in film school, and Earthlings came out on DVD, and I wasn't vegan, and someone came up to me and said, "Have you heard of this movie?" I was like, "No, what is it?" He goes, "It's supposed to be like torturous to watch. Do you want to try and watch it?" And out of like morbid curiosity and like being a young college guy, I was like, "Oh, we can do it. Like we can watch it." No idea what it was. And that's why I think a lot of people watch it. And now non-vegans know.
Right.
Non-vegans know what those movies are. And I don't think that I don't think non-vegans are watching them as much anymore. I've sort of moved to films that inspire conversation and open discourse, and also that offer a solution, more than just go vegan, please.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I turned into a big fangirl of Casey Means, Dr. Casey Means, and discovered her just a few days ago. She wrote a book called Good Energy, and she talks about our metabolism and how the healthcare system is broken. She was a surgeon trained at Stanford, and as she was 10 years into her career, she made a hard right and said, I can't do this anymore because all I'm doing is putting a Band-Aid by doing surgeries and giving medication. All I'm doing is putting a Band-Aid on what the real problem is. And she goes, it's our food. And I read that she's vegan, but then I've been listening to her and she says, well, healthy proteins in the form of salmon and chicken. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, there's a disconnect here. But her message is so intense around what's happening to the children. And I think that's something that if there's a way to educate people without shaming them, because oftentimes it's not the parents, it's not their fault because they've been led to believe something that just isn't true. So how do you propose that we educate people, one about the health, one about the animals, one about the environment, because it's all connected. And yet so many people, they hear the message, but they go, I don't want to hear it. I don't, don't shove that stuff down my throat. How do we, with love, educate people so that they can say, oh, we have been manipulated, we have been lied to, because healthcare and big pharma and the food industry, they're all growing industries in a way that they're not solving the problem, they're creating more of the problem because there are people that are profiting from that.
I think that we do that by taking an understanding approach, like by not posting things like I'll see a vegan post on social media, a picture of someone eating a cheeseburger and saying, the caption will say, I don't know, I just don't understand how anyone can do that. Really? Mm-hmm. You really don't? How long have you been vegan? Like years? So for most of your life you're doing that, you say you can't understand? Yes, you can. Like stop othering, stop creating this divide between vegans and non-vegans. Be willing to validate what a non-vegan says. Like I'm a 7th generation Texan. I grew up on barbecue and burgers, right? If I'm talking to someone who says, yeah, I just don't know if I can give up barbecue, I can totally understand why he's saying that. I can understand the joy of getting together with a group of people, having this like primal fire grilling thing going on and everything that goes with it. And it's like this community building experience and everyone's eating and enjoying this. I get it. And it tastes good. It does. I mean, come on, and the best way to say it is, or best thing to do is say, well, I'll go on barbecue with you if I can bring my own stuff,
Right. But
if you validate what they say, now they know you're listening. And
it's interesting. And I want to interject something there because in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's one alcoholic can speak to another in a way that a non-alcoholic can't, because non-alcoholics say, well, just quit drinking. And it's like, well, it's not that simple. But an alcoholic who's sober can relate and say, okay, I know what you're going through and here's what I did. Same with vegans. It takes a Texan to know a Texan kind of thing.
Yeah. And if we're willing to be honest with who we are and who we say we were, we still are them. When I went before I went vegan, I was a 7th generation Texan. I grew up on barbecue and burgers. I loved football and boxing, right? And now that I'm vegan, I'm a 7th generation
Texan, and I did that. Add the seafood to it too.
Yeah, and now that I'm vegan, I'm a 7th generation Texan who loves barbecue and burgers, football and boxing. The barbecue and burgers are just vegan now. Nothing changed. Everything else, everything that changed was actually very superficial almost. What I consider food, what I consider clothes, what I consider entertainment, maybe some of the language I use. Everything else is the same. And it's this idea that you don't love animals unless you're vegan. If that's true, you wouldn't be vegan. If you didn't love animals before you were vegan, why'd you go vegan?
Right.
Right. You know, and so we need to stop like this sort of superiority message and stop this creating this divide between vegans and non-vegans. And I'll say, I know who you are. You know, I was, you know, there, but for the flip of a coin, right? You know, I was fortunate to have enough like people influence me in my life that I was willing to try it. But if, you know, human beings, we love animals. We do. And we're also taught from the moment we can be taught that you're a human being. And as a human being, you have to eat meat and dairy, because if you don't, you might get sick. You might even die. Every person of authority tells you that. Your parents, your teachers, your doctors, your nurses, everyone. Then 30 years down the road, when you've had at least 30,000 meals in your life at the age of 30, all of them or most of them having animal products in them, some skinny tattooed vegan on the street yells at you and says, you need to be vegan. Is it reasonable to think that this person is just going to change their entire dietary and lifestyle habits because some stranger yelled at them? No, of course not. And why won't they look? They don't want to look because they love animals, but they believe they have to eat them. And if you love animals and you believe that you have to eat them, I don't want to see it. I just want to know that I just want to eat it and just be like, well, I don't have a choice. I'm just going to have to eat this, you know?
Those are great points, Bobby. Those, you know, seriously, that you just, it kind of like was a aha moment of like, we've had 30,000 meals by the time we're 30, and most of them are meat based and dairy based. And then a skinny vegan with tattoos on the street corner. And worse is you know, an overweight vegan on the street corner telling us that we have to quit, you know? Yeah. So good point. Good point.
Yes. Yes. And I want to add to that too, that what you were describing was us being examples of how to be this lifestyle versus shoving it on somebody and saying, you got to be this lifestyle. I mean, the best way to promote it is to be it and show up it, as you being it. I love the whole 7-year generation. Yeah. Yeah.
I also think that there was either intentional or not, some really poor promises made by the vegan community to non-vegans, especially in terms of athletes, where they say, oh, you don't need to worry about protein. Yeah, you do. Protein's important. And if you're trying to be a bodybuilder, it's very important. And if you tell someone who's a bodybuilder who's training on meat and whey and saying, no, you don't have to worry about that, and then they change and all of a sudden they're not getting the same results because they're not getting enough protein, they're going to swing hard back the other direction, aren't they?
Right. Good point.
Is vegan diet perfect for everyone and everything? Yes, it can be if you do it right, but you can't just say protein's not important.
Right.
But we make these messages without context. And context matters. Who are you talking to? Are you talking to someone who lives a sedentary lifestyle, who isn't very fit and doesn't do much? Sure, they're getting enough protein every day if they eat 2,000, 2,500 calories plants. You talking to someone who's like 6'6", 250 solid muscle and who works out in the gym every day? No, they got to focus on what they're doing. They got to really focus.
Right. Right.
That's when they go to the Jeff Palmers of the world. And
yeah. I mean, that's being the example. Jeff is the example that they have to look at. They're not looking at this person who's sedentary and, you know, 2,500 calories of veganism will work for them. It won't work for everybody. You got to figure out your particular piece of it. And I want to go back to really, this is like probably going to be a longer piece of the conversation, but I want to go back to children. Okay. You had a segment that you entitled Slaughterhouse Children. And when I saw that, I had so many things go through my brain about it. From the kids working in the slaughterhouses, from the kids learning about plant-based foods, and somewhere in the middle are the kids, the millions of kids who are thinking that animal-based products are good for them, and they have no connection to the actual animals. Tell us a little bit about what that project was, what the impact was, what the result has been, what started it.
Well, I didn't actually work on that. I was sharing that for somebody. But it's weird. These documentaries come out that are very powerful, and I wish there was a way to track what kind of impact they have. And I wish that it didn't need to be tracked, that I could just go out and see it, right? Which is disheartening. I don't know what kind of impact that has. Hopefully it creates some changes on like a state and national level in terms of making sure that kids aren't allowed to work in slaughterhouses, especially undocumented children who are being taken advantage of. Hopefully that happens, but we'll see.
Well, we will definitely hope for that. But even more than that, we'll keep that conversation going, because again, when people don't know and they're unaware, they don't know and can't do anything. And
Exactly.
so it's this whole awareness piece. So thank you for sharing that, because it did get picked up by at least one person.
Well, it's interesting because what you just said, Velin, about when people don't know. And sometimes the truth is so shocking. Sometimes the truth is so, it's so evil. And we just go, how can that be true? How can the politicians do that? How can the big farmers do that? How can that be? How can the factory farms put children in there to work and put them at risk? And, all the stuff that goes on. And I think for all of us, we're doing our piece of the puzzle. We're trying to be part of the solution. And it's doing what we can, like having podcast shows like this, to raise the awareness that hopefully more than one person hears the message and they say, maybe it's worth researching. And that's always my encouragement. And before I tell you what my encouragement is, I want to remind people that you're listening to the Veganpreneur Revolution podcast show. And our guest is Bobby Sud, and just an amazing, amazing photographer, an amazing human being, and has a great mission in life that he's on. And I encourage you to go ahead and subscribe to this channel, and please hit the like button, leave a review, because that helps with the algorithms. But my encouragement to people is that you do your own research and really dig deep and look at where the funding goes for reports that are put out there, research papers, because oftentimes something that says animal products are good for you, you have to have animal protein, it's funded by the animal agriculture industry. Or milk does a body good, that's funded by the dairy industry. I heard a shocking statistic that 75% of people in Congress are getting funded by big pharma, healthcare, and the food manufacturers, and they're the ones passing the laws. So you need to do your own research, and you need to pull back the curtain. And you don't need to. I would encourage you to, because if you don't, what's going to happen is the younger generation today is not going to live longer than their parents. That is a fact of life. 80% of the adult population in the United States is either overweight or obese. All of that trails down to diseases like diabetes. When you turned your life around, Bobby, with type 2 diabetes, that's phenomenal. We've been told that you cannot cure these diseases. Yes, you can. They're preventable. And so my encouragement is please, please, please do your research. So I just wanted to get on my soapbox a little bit there.
I'll jump on mine for just a second too, back to the point about children. The CDC has already said that the generation of children today will not outlive their parents because of this. And to that point, they are trying to get a federal mandate that milk be given in all schools all across the country, once again, which people need to know about and not agree to, and get your legislators and all of your people in Congress to vote down that, to not vote for that bill. The other thing is that, on the contrary, and on the upside, there is legislation that has been passed in the state of Illinois that is requiring every school in the state of Illinois, kindergarten through high school, to add plant-based options to the school menu. And that is being worked into the school system now. There's an organization that we work with, Plant-Based Nutrition Movement, that is a child nutrition focused nonprofit organization that is helping school districts and schools to implement this within the state of Illinois. But we want this to happen across the US, where school districts are changing to allow for plant-based options on their school menus. Lunch, some have breakfast and lunch options. Some just have lunch. And there's a school district in New York that is already, after 6 years of having plant-based options in their menu for schools in their district, they're already recording savings of over $1 million. Can you imagine where those funds can go to support the school system when it's not going to harmful food? And so I'm saying this, Bobby, so that you can carry this information into your next things out there happening, so that more people will know and understand and participate. Who would have thought you could have made this kind of a change within a school system and had plant-based lunches for your kids right there in school?
Yeah, when people ask me about, like, will things change fast enough, or are things changing fast enough? I always remind them the hardest thing is to accept the pace at which change is occurring. We cannot affect that any more than just doing what we're doing, right? But I also remind them that in 1914 is when the Wright brothers first flew. They took their famous flight. And afterwards, there was a reporter who interviewed one of them and asked, "Do you think we'll ever land on the moon?" And his answer was something like, "No, or maybe in 1,000,000 years," right? It was 60 years later that we landed on the moon. No, 50 years later, right? So it's this sort of thing of probability and possibility.
Right.
Will in my lifetime, will I see a vegan world? Probably not. It's possible, though. So I just got to choose, like, which mindset I want to take.
True.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, I have to say, this has been delightful, Bobby. And in closing, what are your final thoughts for people? What would you like to leave people with?
I mean, just be honest, be understanding. I don't remember, this is not my quote, but I read it a long time ago that said, "We try so hard to be understood, let's not forget to be understanding." And I think that that's a good approach for activists to take.
I love it.
I think that bears repeating. Please repeat that.
Yeah, and again, I'm sorry, I don't remember who said this. It's not my quote, but I read it years ago that said, "We try so hard to be understood, let's not forget to be understanding."
Love that. Thank you.
We keep pushing buttons. Lynn and I are really good at pushing buttons. And the older we get, the less we care whose button we push. But yeah, that's one advantage of getting older. You can just blame it. I forget what the term is. It's for an octogenarian or something. That's in your 80s. And I looked up what it was in your 70s. And I actually posted that today, that I'm in that category. And I'm like, oh my God, when did that happen? It's crazy. It's crazy because I look at all these things. And, one thing you said, Bobby, about that when you went into the first factory farm, you couldn't show any emotion. And my wife does horse rescue, used to do a lot. And she's now a ranger for the county. And when she used to go, that was the thing that she knew she had to do, was have no emotion, because they were trying to rescue these animals that were abused animals. It wasn't factory farms, but oftentimes horses, there were cows, there were sheep. And she said, inside, she was so angry at what the person had done, the ignorance. And she said, I had to remove myself from that and realize this is for the animals. And a lot of times we do forget that this is for the animals. This is for the children. This is for the elderly. This is for our health. This is for the planet. And so again, thank you, Bobby, so much for all you're doing. I from the first time I met you, I just really appreciate all you did and all you continue to do. And you turned your health around. You're turning people's minds around, and you're doing it with love. So I appreciate that. So thank you for being with us. And Belin, what are your closing thoughts?
Thank you, Bobby. I think you brought a dimension of the conversation today that I'm not sure we've actually touched on before.
Oh.
So thank you for that. This was mind-opening, and for some, I hope, life-altering because of what it was that you shared. So thank you. And to our audience, we love bringing these kinds of conversations to you. It's part of our passion and the Veganpreneur Revolution. We invite you to join us, to find Bobby, to connect with him, and be a part of the conversation. This is all about conversing. We're not trying to convince, we're in the conversation. And if you're in the conversation of using lifestyle and food as medicine, and you are a health practitioner, a vegan, and you'd like to be on the Veganpreneur Revolution podcast, look us up. Reach out.
Have a great day. Bye-bye. You've been listening to the Veganpreneur Revolution podcast show with Velyn Hopkins and Kathleen Gage. Be sure to leave a review, give a thumbs up, and subscribe to this channel. And visit our website at veganvisibilityproductions.com. That's veganvisibilityproductions.com. Have a great day and live healthy.